No, that's you didn't know that I was
Oh,
gonna be
okay,
done.
that's on the same. Okay.
So it's like drinking out of a fire hose, you know, it's one of those.
What's your other occupation?
Well, I am retired. For 40 years I was in
Yes.
industrial, large corporations. In-house corporation. If you're familiar in Rutland.
Yeah, everything's.
They do, but I worked for a little company by the name of Halo Technologies there. I was their outside sales. Brilliant. People here in the house. With their invention. And their machine for them. Had a ball for the last 10 years. Thank you for welcoming me.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to learning.
Great, and what committee are you in?
I'm on institutions of correction. Yeah,
Sure.
I'm getting a great education from Alan. He's a very good teacher. I mean that sincerely.
Sure, yeah. He knows the ropes.
She's good. Thank you.
Maybe
Okay.
you took my seat.
Took your seat?
I don't know. Where do you sit? Correct. I
I'm
sat
on the wall, on the far end of the building, in the center on the side. So, so
between, are
Alice
you,
sits here.
yep, are you between Troy and,
I
and,
am.
oh, that's my seat.
Well, I knew there was a.
But
It felt right.
I'm happy to give it to you. Honestly, I was ready to pass it on.
How many years were you?
4 years, not always in that seat, but we moved,
Are you looking
we
for-
started in Zoom.
I was just poking around. They're always doing.
4 years.
So it's exciting.
I'm sorry, I missed your name. Thank you. Next
My
time.
mouth is full.
No, I understand. And that was unfair of me to ask the question right then, but.
Michelle Bosley, Westminster, Rockingham, Northern Wyndham County.
Very good. Very good. Well. It is learning, right for me. Logan Cole.
Right? Are you from
Love
Loveland?
Potion.
Okay. I taught for 6 years at, oh, right here.
Wow.
No, wow. I was just thinking that.
We did.
You just like say, somebody has to have like 5 hours of training and you might get an endorsement. I mean, make it simple. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
from Randolph.
Yeah.
The cars get in an accident?
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
Yeah, we should ask for that.
I understand that it.
Yeah, Logan was in with, if he had a baby, what, I can't imagine.
Or.
We have a police report, you know, what kind of a, yeah, we should ask about
I'm
that.
certainly with this very expensive new data system that they're.
Right, right. Yeah, can we do that?
Right, I
Yeah.
think so, yeah.
Well, I apologize for that because I felt like I was being sort of snarky when I said, actually, it's not a short film. No. I was just trying to be accurate, yeah, it's my best, but it didn't really matter. I just thought, oh, God, why did I say that?
Well, then you
Yeah.
said something kind of.
I apologize. Yeah, he was fine. Yes. I felt bad. I was like, okay, so it's snarky.
Obviously, I have very little, I will say. Very happy that I'm on the top. So, I like the combination of.
How do you got the detail? You don't have to stand and look well.
I might go
Everybody else
after
can.
I.
Yeah.
Never pizza to myself before.
I know, but I was going, they told me, I was like, how did that happen? It's just- So, yeah, they have their. I don't think we're. Running over here.
I just felt like it was too much, construction. I mean, I had my first session, I swear we had 40 hours of testimony.
They're just for.
Building parking lot.
Yeah, like.
Right.
ice on tires and equipment. I'm like, I didn't know. The worst part was like, really important, we live in Burlington, I get it, but like, I wanted more humans, humans and food, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just don't. And I had worked a little bit, not a lot, I worked for a year in a community justice section, so I was like, oh, I have some perspective on the corrections part, so that made sense, back to my second.
Yay, pizza! Yay! Yay!
Wow.
I'm doing something completely unrelated to this job.
Total place.
So.
I saw you like 2 a.m. yesterday. Today's Wednesday, last night was Wednesday. I don't know.
Hi.
Hello. Okay, I'm trying on to get the Kurtzville stuff into the T-bill.
Oh, great.
You'd think it was like it's the most difficult thing in the whole world. Hey, no Jordan today?
Jordan's got a double, just got a double block.
And you've got, okay. Oh, David's reviewing the pizza.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Like that.
Between 2020.
Pepperoni and some special
It counts for me when it's spelled like that.
Thank you. It has to be totally clear.
Okay, so that is not the legal counsel.
That's right, yeah.
Let's go on so, okay, so you are a member of. It's going to be like that.
And that's right.
It looks.
Yes, the other.
It's the way they spell it.
It is, okay.
The land use, the legislative council makes it. Spell it differently.
A big going from transportation. That's great.
Well, if they're both on it, and I don't need it.
Okay, if you don't want to be.
Yeah, unless you're like, hey, we need. I mean, Alice is doing her wallflowers, so.
No, that's right.
And look, we got Anthony here, yay, second senator.
It's Chris
Yeah, so we heard today, Andy and I were in committee, and I made a pretty concerted effort on the Kurtz bill, right? I'm trying to get those sections in there.
Which particular thing?
Well, that's. I want to get.
Your discussion on foot transit.
Yeah, we're trying to,
Very
it went very well. We want to add the money
You
to
know
it.
what?
Our cost of revenue. Or did she said, thinking about delivery fee?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I
You're
don't
gonna
want
get to me last cycle.
Okay.
And boy, you gave me a run for my money.
I said, go for it.
But we lost it. More case. So we got. And in the past.
No, oh, you don't see me on Saturday. Saturday, I just.
We just let her get a chance, so it's a quick time.
Oh,
It's the.
We can say the affordable.
You gotta have one that are, you gotta
Full break.
Oh, it's funny, so so I met a lot of people who want to talk about all the stuff going on in the state house. Where I'm like, well, maybe I need to.
Senate chair. Yes. That's.
No, no,
Yeah.
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 not climate related, but, the ice. Yeah.
I think it is helpful. And they can look at it.
Yeah.
Just these.
I should tell you that. It should be very taxing.
I had a problem.
Like a year ago.
We put things in the way, they were all over the place. We probably got them. They were hard for people.
Yeah, well, you should know, this guy who really dislikes them is like declined to meet with them. He said that he declined to meet with them. He's given them the I statement, it's discriminatory against. I was like, sir.
The middle class is, I felt like I was on board today. Our middle class. Under the middle class.
Like, done that. Elon Musk is very financial, but.
I'm gonna let you get out of your way.
Okay, we're gonna get ready in like 3 minutes, 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
But yeah, people can, there's somebody. What,
Yeah, don't worry.
We are.
Right?
I didn't the right one.
I'm not the one that you ever seen here?
You could do it here if you wanted to like stand, I could put my laptop up there and you could go over.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be happy to do.
Okay, yeah.
It was,
I was like, I called first and I was like, oh.
I'm very
Yeah.
Where is right? So they're working on it, but it's just like, and where is it going to be? So he's like, they're just trying to say that Okay, we're gonna get started. There we go. That's all about it. Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for having pizza. Yay, Jim Maslin. Okay, so we've got a really interesting agenda item for you to hear today. We have Barry Duvall and Richard Cowart, who are both climate counselors, and they're going to tell us a little bit about the post-thermal Affordable Heat Act world, as well as what are we talking about with thermal efficiency now. My hope is that we have a presentation 10, 15 minutes, and then we open it up. So if you start to percolate questions, I'll leave that to the presenters to decide how they want to interact with the audience, but we will have a lot of time for questions, and we're going to try to get out of here in 35 minutes. So you'll get back to committee. So.
And I just want to say, we are very honored to have Jared and Rich here, experts in this field and all the work that you've done. Thank you so much.
So take it away.
Thank you, Senator White and Representative Burke, members of the caucus. My name is Jared Duvall, member of the Climate Council. I I just want to state, and I know Rich will say this as well, that we are here presenting today in our individual capacity as counselors. We can speak to some of the recommendations that were in the first climate action plan that was adopted, but we're in the process of revising that. And so anything that we speak to right now is draft, and it will not be, we won't have a kind of final revised climate action plan to reference until July. So we're speaking in our individual capacities rather than on behalf of the council as a whole.
That's your legal disclaimer at the bottom.
So I'm just going to start with some context and some data on the thermal sector, and then Rich will discuss the policy landscape and the policy options and the pros and cons of different approaches.
Right.
So thermal sector, when we talk about emissions, this is residential, commercial, and industrial fuel use. It's primarily, though, how we heat and cool buildings. And one of the reasons this is so important to focus on is because it really is one of the elephants in the room, regardless of what lens we're looking through, whether it's how much energy we use as a state, how much climate pollution we produce as a state, or really importantly, the share of money that family budgets spend on energy. So any of those that we look at, especially if we look at energy expenditures and climate pollution, about a third of that is produced by the thermal or residential, commercial, and industrial fuel use sector. This is a brand new graph that we've produced that takes data that started being reported by the Vermont Tax Department in 2017 on statewide fossil heating fuel sales, primarily fuel oil and propane. That's complemented by data we get from VGS on fossil gas sales. And I just want to point something out that is really important here. And that is, if you look at 2020, you can see the estimated amount that was spent on fossil heating fuels in Vermont. And then you look at 2022, and it increased by about 50%. And Vermonters saw, I believe it's about a $300 million increase in their heating costs because of our exposure to and dependence on high cost and price volatile fuels. And this is kind of amazing because this bill for Vermont increased by 50% over 2 years, while consumption was flat. So what that tells us is that the primary difference was the price of that heating fuel spiking. And that happened in relation, we know, to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And so we kind of see that fossil heating fuel has been relatively flat and slightly declining. A concerning thing is that that has been happening at the same time as our winters have been warming. 2024 was the warmest year ever recorded in Vermont, and that's the primary driver of declining fossil fuel use. We also know that the status quo is costly to Vermont because we import 100% of the fossil fuels that we use, and that sends a lot of our hard-earned dollars out of the state. So it varies by the fuel, but on average, 75 cents of every dollar that we spend on fossil fuel leaves the state economy, primarily going to multinational corporations. Whereas when we are using our energy dollars to pay for electricity, say in the form of a heat pump water heater or heat pump, that equation nearly gets reversed. And we see a much higher share of our money staying and recirculating here in Vermont, investing in local jobs. And I want to pause here because I think this is really important to the affordability and cost conversation. Oftentimes when we talk about affordability, we too often talk about the cost of action, not the cost of inaction, or the upfront cost of making a change rather than the potential lifetime savings that can come from that change of helping people get off of the fossil fuel roller coaster. So this is just one example. This is modeling of lifetime cost comparison of a residential heat pump water heater versus a propane water heater. And you can see that without incentives, it often is lower price to buy a propane water heater than it would be a heat pump water heater. But almost immediately, the overall costs of running a propane water heater for Vermonters end up exceeding the cost of the heat pump water heater because of the high cost of propane relative to using electricity, which is lower cost, more efficiently. And so in the end, this range depends on the incentive you get for a heat pump water heater. But over its lifetime, it's estimated that a propane water heater will cost a Vermont household $3,000 more than a heat pump water heater. So this is what we're talking about in terms of the opportunity to save money and reduce that energy bill and fossil fuel bill. Another reason that the thermal sector is important is that it has proven the most difficult to reduce pollution in. We look at our other energy sectors, we have seen major declines in climate pollution. 66% reduction in emissions from our electricity sector from 2005 to 2021. 25% reduction in emissions from the transportation sector from 2005. But these are proving really stubborn to reduce the emissions from fossil heating fuel use. And so it requires a special focus. My last slide is I want to point out what is in my opinion as a counselor, a backward situation in terms of our policy of what we incentivize and what we disincentivize. Right now on your electricity bill, about 6% of that bill is in the form of fees, charges, and taxes. In contrast, on your propane or fuel oil bill, fees, taxes, and charges are less than 1/10 of that bill. So we're putting 10 times the fees and charges and taxes on our cleanest energy source, electricity, and we're putting 10 times less on our most polluting. So you can see the climate pollution per unit in fossil fuels here. I'm trying to come up with an analogy. I welcome ideas of what this would be like in another area of public policy. I think the first one that came to mind was it would be like putting a tax on running shoes, removing taxes from cigarettes.
Question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick question. So on the Vermont electricity tax, that is inclusive of Efficiency Vermont?
Efficiency charge,
Okay.
yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Passing the torch.
All right, we're gonna see this work.
And we didn't even knock over a TV.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Go ahead.
pleasure to be here. As Jared said, I'm here today as an individual member of Climate Council. We can't speak for the council as a whole. And he had the fun part of giving you the juicy data, and I have the challenging part of explaining lots of policy options. But I basically have two bottom lines. The first is that, as Jared just showed you, the thermal sector is essentially the policy orphan in the climate debates in the energy policy world. They have sort of been in the back room for decades, whereas we have made really substantial progress on electricity, on natural gas, on and we have made progress on vehicles, and we're going to continue to make progress on vehicles. But the challenge in front of us is how to deal with both the high costs and the high emissions from the thermal sector. That's what this is about. Now, the climate plan the last climate plan in 2021 had three major policy recommendations. Was to adopt the California's Advanced Clean Cars 2 policy, which has been done. Congratulations to ANR for going forward with that. Join the Transportation and Climate Initiative, which was something supported in this building, but that never came to pass. And to implement a clean heat standard, which has not yet come to pass. The Climate Council is now creating a new plan for updating the plan. And in the updated plan, we are, there's a thermal task force that has reported, that has met many, many times, and reported its recommendations to what's called the Cross-Sector Mitigation Committee, created by legislation, of which I'm the co-chair. And that process has led to these recommendations, which are currently draft recommendations for consideration by the council. That is, one or more high-level policy actions that would drive change across the thermal sector in a way that would reliably lead to significant cost savings and significant emission reductions. One or more or both adopting a cap and invest policy, either linking up with New York or linking up with the Western Climate Initiative, or through legislation and administrative action, modifying the clean heat standard. And it could be called something else, and it could be substantially modified with a cost cap and a sort of a moderate trajectory. But one or more of those policies is under consideration now at the Climate Council. We also proposed, when I say proposed,
You're drafting.
it's in the draft that's going to be considered in coming months to secure funding for comprehensive weatherization, to secure funding that would accomplish what Jared was just talking about, which is to accelerate the pace of the installation of heat pump water heaters and heat pumps, and also advanced wood heat systems, so that we can get off the fossil fuels for heating. And then conduct a study, which would need to be done with an eye on other states as well, to consider whether to adopt what are called equipment standards, or low emission equipment standards for heating equipment and for hot water heaters. Now, here we have an incredibly busy slide that you all can study at your leisure, but I kind of want to like elevate this conversation to the highest level. And, you know, everybody in this room is an expert in public policy design. You know, you all think about these all the time. Like, what are the techniques we can use to, make change happen in an environmental arena, or in this case, in energy/environmental. And the first column on the left there, we named sort of generic types of actions, a performance standard. Now, a clean heat standard was a performance standard. It was an obligation on obligated parties to perform to a certain level. We have a performance standard. We're used to this. The renewable energy standard in Vermont is a performance standard. It's not, this isn't something that came from Mars. This is something that we know how to do. And the next one down is a performance standard with a price cap. And if, this is my opinion, if I were modifying the clean heat standard today, I would try to deal with the uncertainty that everybody felt about the clean heat standard, or whatever we do next, by just building right into it a price cap. Like, this is a new policy. Let's make sure that we understand how it's going to work before we enact it, and we put a price cap on it. And sort of calm down the debates about trying to predict what's going to happen in fuel markets. When we launched Efficiency Vermont many years ago, we started with a cap on how much it was going to cost. Then once we got used to how it would work, we were able to relax that cap and do what we intended to do all along, frankly, which was to maximize the cost savings that we would get from Efficiency Vermont over time. So, and that has succeeded extremely well. But we can start with the price cap for sure, and for that matter, the legislature can determine to keep the price cap forever. System benefit charges. System benefit charge is what we do with efficiency Vermont. We're quite used to collecting the revenue in order to support energy efficiency investments. We have a weatherization. The Weatherization Trust Fund is funded by a system benefit charge. We've been unfortunately stuck at an incredibly low level on the weatherization charge for a really long time. And definitely it's time to change that. And cap it, well, there's two more. Cap and invest. You all are familiar with cap and invest policies. We know it well in Vermont because we participate in RGGI. RGGI has done really a fantastic job of lowering emissions throughout the region from the power sector and returning revenue to Vermont, which we invest, some of which or most of which we invest in the thermal sector. We could have a cap and invest. We could join a cap and invest scheme, either, as I said, with New York or perhaps with some other states at some point. And then the last thing is the technology standard for heating equipment. It's a different option where the heating equipment to be sold in Vermont would need to meet very low emission standards. So it's the equivalent of the Clean Cars 2 for heating equipment, to think of it that way. So my main point here is that we have experience with every single one of these types of actions. But what we don't have is experience applying them in the thermal sector. And my recommendation to the legislature, if you want to take action in this area, you should try to, figure out how you can assess this whole range of options and decide which ones you think are the highest priority. And frankly, if you study the way these policies are adopted in other states and around the world, you'll see that you're not just going to want one of them. You're going to want some combination of an enhanced weatherization program, plus something that would help to incentivize the delivery of heat pumps, plus maybe an equipment standard, so that going forward, we're not locking in new highly polluting heating equipment that's going to be there for the next 25 years. There's a combination of policies that you are highly likely to want to adopt. Now, how can this body do that? I almost hate to say it. You probably need a summer study committee.
I don't study anymore.
Report.
Right.
Rich, do you have any more slides after this?
No.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'll start by saying, thank you so much for the clarity of explaining what we will potentially in draft form see from the Climate Action Plan and from the Climate Council. You should all know that the start of the clean heat standard conversation happened in this actual room with a Climate Solutions Caucus meeting many, many years ago is really where it kicked off. So we have an opportunity collectively as a group to have an impact on this and to move forward in a good direction. So if you're up for it, you and Jared, I see we've got at least one Representative Couch, and then I saw, yep. So do you want to go first? Because you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I don't know if I have a specific question, but I have a statement to the group.
Please.
This is wonderful on an intellectual level. But we got our asses kicked in the last election on a gut level.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know how to frame this.
Yeah.
And until we do, we're stuck. And what I hope we can look at as a group is how we can start to frame this in a way. And I think starting with the key to affordability has to include this stuff. And as a group, I hope we can be able to take this and put it out there in a way that we can message it so we don't get our asses kicked again over these issues.
Ooh, well said. Thank you for just like ripping the Band-Aid off of that one, because I think that's, as, you know, you're both in the policy space, but I would just say anyone who ran for election this last time, we have some, maybe we're a little triggered, by this conversation, because we, not only due to massive amounts of misinformation and spending by out-of-state organizations, there was a through line conversation of anything to do with the Affordable Heat Act or Clean Heat Standard meant that we were directly hurting the lowest income folks, and we were personally to blame for a fuel bill increase. So I think that that conversation is one we can have as a group on how we want to message it. But your policy decisions on like what is the best policy decision is almost a little bit separate, because those arguments could be levied against anything that we do. But go ahead, Phil, and then if you want.
And thanks for this information. I was just curious on the systems benefit charge, the ability to predict emissions says low as far as predicting, but the benefit to emissions isn't necessarily low. Is that how I should read that, or?
Oh, yeah, it's the ability to predict is what's on the chart. The benefits of emission reduction might be high. Yeah,
Yes.
I agree. Yeah, I'm not a politician but I am very sympathetic, you know, to the fact that in the political world, this has been a tough topic. You know, the reason why, you know, what's the reason that the weatherization charge has been I was in this building 30 years ago advocating for a weatherization charge when I was chair of the Public Utility Commission. We got 1 penny. And I see it's since been raised to 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that was back in 2018. A bunch of us were here for that. That was.
And, you know, yeah, weatherization is incredibly popular as a public policy. People want to see an effective way to promote weatherization. And so there's just a mismatch there that I think only it's not it can't be overcome theoretically. It has to be overcome through explaining things to people.
Yeah.
And like I say, I'm not a politician, so I can't offer advice as the best way to message that. But people want to see much more rapid weatherization progress in the state. And we know from experience that with Efficiency Vermont, for example, that if you invest, you can save.
Yeah.
But if you're never going to invest, then you're back to, you know, that chart that Jared showed. Where, did I skip that?
Oh, it's at the
That was
beginning.
it.
No, this one.
Oh.
You know, Jared mentioned how much the cost of thermal fuels went up in Russia invades Ukraine. Across gasoline and thermal fuels, Vermonters' fuel bills went up $750 million in 1 year. And when you think about it, you know, that the huge impact, if that had been caused by anything else other than, oh, well, it's the world price of it, you know, the people would have been absolutely outraged. But because we're so dependent on oil, we're trapped. So, you know, investing in alternatives to get us off that roller coaster seems to me to be, you know, prudent public policy. It will save people money. And we have to find a way to finance our way into it. Now, one policy option, which we didn't put on the chart, is something that's called on-bill financing, tariff on-bill financing, where building owners can pay for the cost of the heat pump or the weatherization job or what have you over time in a way that allows the cost to be paid back or their portion of the cost to get paid back. And they start saving money immediately. So that's something to talk about with the treasurer, whether we can come up with a financing mechanism to allow on-bill financing It's not a private loan to the building owner. It's collected over time, basically on the meter, regardless of who owns the building. So you think you're gonna sell your house, fine, you can sell the house. The heat pump is still there, the weatherization is still there, and the new owner takes up the payments because they're getting the benefits.
And thank you for that additional, you threw in another policy suggestion to us. So I saw Angela and then Jim. But, let's respond to her question, or,
Let me also get to Chair, I'm just standing here, he's.
I just wanted to say one thing very briefly about this last chart. It's advanced to it.
You love your charts.
Sorry, this one we put together this morning, so it's not as well formatted as usually put together. But I think it's important for a couple of reasons, because what it helps show is that, as Rich said, there's no silver bullet policy. And oftentimes we're going to want to be looking for complementary policies and combinations but there's also strengths and weaknesses to all of these. So one of the reasons the clean heat standard was appealing is because it scored the highest on being able to deliver cost-effective emissions reductions. But it had some weaknesses. There was low clarity on what the price effect would be on fossil fuels. But the analysis was that overall Vermont's energy bills would go down, and the folks who decided to take up the incentives that would result for weatherization and heat pumps would see their bills go down. But I think the concern that was brought up around low and middle income Vermonters was you were only going to get those benefits if you decided to participate, if you decided to weatherize, if you decided to get an incentive or a grant for a heat pump water heater. There are other policies where if you want to say, we want to hold everybody harmless and make sure that they come out ahead regardless of how they heat their space or their water, there are other options that can do that. Have an invest policy, you can directly rebate money to folks who are continuing to use fossil fuel so that their overall costs go down because you've directly provided a rebate in the form of on their utility bill or an EBT card or some other. And so, all of these are going to have, we color coded it to make it a little bit easier. There's things that are really appealing about them, but they all have weaknesses as well. And so, some of it is optimizing for the policy. Some of it is optimizing for the things that you and your constituents care about. And so I just wanted to provide that context.
Thank you, Jared. And I thought, Representative Armso, did you have?
Yeah, and it actually, I was sort of adding to.
I'll stay up there.
Representative Ricky Umber, but then it certainly is related to what you were just saying, Jared. I think this slide is super helpful for me visually, and combined with the first slide, or the one we were just looking at right before this, where we see that jump from 2020 to 22. It's really interesting that I think that one, looking at the clean heat standard, performance standard, using the clean heat standard perhaps as an example, there's only one red block in that grid, and yet it proved to be a fatal flaw.
Yeah.
And thinking about the chart just before the slide, just before this, that Vermonters did experience a jump in their heating fuel costs, but they accepted it because it wasn't imposed by state government. See, so it's all these perceptions and psychology that work into it. And I think, I'm not saying anything that everyone in here doesn't already know, but just I'm thinking about how important it is to consider sociology, psychology of policymaking around the thermal sector, how specific that is, but just how important that is as we move forward. And that's why the other chart is so helpful, because as you're saying, it's all it's the cost benefit analysis, it's a risk benefit, it's all the analyses, but seeing it that way, it's nothing's perfect, but we know now from experience that price effect clarity is extremely important. And I would hope that we, just as this group, and as our, two bodies, keep in mind that that psychology of this type of policy.
And I'll just say, so we've got about 4 to 5 minutes left. I saw we had Jim's hand, we had maybe some other folk, we had Candace.
Phil.
And sorry, Phil, did we miss you?
That's all right. Yeah, no, I'll wait.
Okay, but I do just want to lift up one thing. We are talking about how people heat and cool their homes. So they take it you're heating and cooling your home. Like that is extremely, like that experience of being cold or being too hot is very visceral. And I think to your point, the sociology thing. I'm sorry, Phil, did we totally
No,
skip you?
No, Candace was before me.
Oh,
anyway,
okay,
so.
sorry. And then Jim, and then we'll wrap.
Okay, real quick. I understand why we've discussed incentives for low income people to make this more affordable for them. Are we seems to me, and this has been a commentary from some constituents, you know, the wealthier part of Vermont is really ready to do this. I mean, some of them have done it already. Some of them are willing to do it with a little bit of incentive or, you know, but it seems to me that might be our low hanging fruit. These people kind of have the, you know, the wherewithal, are knowledgeable, want to do the right thing. And with a little bit of incentive, you know, we could really make an impact in that category of Vermonters too. So I just want to put that out there. I don't know if that's coming into your conversations, but
You should talk to Ben Edgley Walsh about super users at some point. There's a whole angle to that. But
I suggest that we take Representative Masson's
yeah,
question.
of course.
Just-
It's a comment, and for any of you working on the clean heat standard, 2.0 or whatever it is. I return from time to time to a phrase that Tim Briglin used, former representative here in this place. He used the phrase from time to time, too many knobs to turn. And when we design a bill, piece of legislation, where there are a lot of moving parts and you have to turn this one in order to get to that one. And then another one, you get the point I'm being. The bill tends to fall down, partially because people find things to object along the way, and they pull it apart. So when we're revising the clean heat standard, I would hope that we could strive for clarity and less knobs to turn than necessary in order to get from here to there, because then we're talking about marketing and have people understand. Oh, I get it. I can get from here to there. This makes sense. I'll do it. So anyway, it's my Tim Brigham comment from today.
That is, and I'll just say, this has been a really insightful conversation. And I think it sounds like a lot of us are on the same page about lessons learned from this election. So I know we do have Senator Watson here, who's the chair of natural resources and has been working on some of this stuff. I don't want to put you on the spot to comment, but certainly this chart we should have sent to you.
We have the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
We can send out.
Yeah.
This will get sent out to everybody.
So, okay, thank you. Oh, it's Bill, go ahead.
A quick comment. I think the average Vermonter, if you talked to them, sat them down, showed them this, they could understand it and, and see the benefit of it. But I'm not sure that's who was objecting to this. It was, a large industry and other folks who were providing the misinformation, and they knew exactly which button to push. And whatever we do, I think keeping it simple helps. And so that, the average Vermonter can see that, what their impact is going to be fairly small and the benefit is going to be fairly big and on the cost side, on the affordability side.
Well said. Okay, any closing thoughts and then we'll release the group?
I have one closing thought. Well, I already gave you one. You need somehow folks in this body to study this kind of analysis and add to it. And you're probably going to need that in order to advance any legislation. But my real bottom line is I totally agree with Representative Maslin that something that's very straightforward, that makes a step, that shows progress, and that could be built upon later, which is how Efficiency Vermont grew. It's how the renewables standard grew. We gained experience with it. We got comfortable with the idea as a state, and then we were able to improve it over time. By waiting around forever is going to keep us on the treadmill we're on, which is $2 billion a year in fossil fuels that this state is importing. And we have no way to control the price.
Okay, with that, thank you, everybody. Thank you.
I just want to say, I think that this group that we could have maybe, before we leave here, conversation and maybe talk to you about how we proceed to set up something for next year. And, I needed with the study group like this be an unofficial study group. It's a little late to set one up, yeah.
This
Okay.
is, yes, okay.
That's all.
For one, having liquid electric.
We might be like.
Sorry, Paul.
Right.
Yeah, we were just having the same conversation.
Perfect.
We have, yeah.
I was sitting there thinking, what a great idea, but it's too late, but it's already on.
So I think it would be very interesting to have this presentation on what.
It's a really good point, and when the clean heat standard was being, debated, I think it was important to keep open
Oh, yeah, oh, no, I
option
think.
lower emissions with advanced wood heat. Pellet stills, our game next time with red pepper. And
I'll try my best. You can write this to this.
Facilitating.
No problem.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Put in your tank. And burn in your furnace. No guards. So,
Depending on how much you have.
clean standard goes back off those trees.
Yeah, there's.
Recognition being, it's gonna take
So
time.
Becca, did we hear,
Upgrade the panels and upgrade the entrances and.
Really? It's got to go.
Said I would. Yeah, oh. No, it's 6 months. I think you can really. Lower than it's.
Looks like.
I just heard.
What?
Shredded chicken.
Some kind, yeah.
So maybe that's.
As you said that, I was thinking. Might be happening.
Right, okay, well, I don't know how much political experience